So I have women all the time, and not to pick on ladies, but this happens in 3 to 1, the women coming into the clinic and say, Gary, I don't get it. I wake up in the morning, I'm fasted. I have a cup of black coffee. I go to Orange Theory. I go hammer down for 55 minutes. I've been doing that 5 days a week for 3 months. I haven't lost a single pound. How is that possible? Like I'm not even eating. I go, well, you're not eating, but your body is. It's just eating you. Because what happens when you don't have any sugar in your bloodstream is you get to the gym, and now you have a 20-minute reserve of glycogen. This is 20 minutes. 20 minutes into your workout, you're out of energy. Your body needs energy now. It takes 3 minutes to liquefy lean muscle. It takes 5 hours to turn fat into energy. Where do you think your body's getting energy? It's burning your own lean muscle. So what happens is you're going hammer down on the treadmill. You are actually digesting your own lean muscle. And then that night you're building it back. And then the next day you work out, and then you build it back. And you work out, and you build it back. So I'm going to tell you something. There's something called 30-30-30. I've never seen anything in my life strip fat off of a human being faster than this. I wish I could have patented it. There's an entire book written by Tim Ferriss called The 4-Hour Body explaining this whole theory. It says 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking, followed by 30 minutes of steady state cardiovascular exercise. Bring your heart rate down to below 135 beats a minute. Do that for a month and watch it eviscerate.
The interesting thing about people with low red blood cell and hemoglobin levels is they're exhausted, but they can't sleep. And you would think it would be the opposite. Why do people that are the most exhausted sleep the worst? Well, because they're both related to the same thing. They're mild hypoxia. It's low oxygen. Why are you tired? Because you have low blood oxygen. If you have anemia, you're tired all the time. If you have anemia, why can't you sleep? Because when you lay down to go to bed at night and you start to fall asleep and your respiration rate starts to fall, your blood oxygen starts to fall. As your blood oxygen falls and it gets to a certain level, your brain panics and wakes you up. So if you look at somebody that's really exhausted during the day, when they sleep, they'll look like a bouncing rubber ball going down the hallway. And the reason why they can't get into a deep sleep is because their brain is trying to save their life and it is keeping them from a deep sleep. And often they'll go to their doctor and they'll take some really powerful sleep medication and they'll wake up the next morning and go, man, I hate taking Tylenol PM because it's still in my system the next day. It's actually not in your system. That drug's been out of your system for hours. You're feeling the effects of having suffocated for 6 hours because you blindfolded the brain from being able to see your level of blood oxygen so it didn't wake you up. And the longer that goes on, the more you exacerbate these issues. But so you do 3 rounds of 30 breaths. On the 30th breath, you exhale and you hold. Allow the carbohydrate receptor to reset. When you don't feel you can hold anymore, you take a deep breath in. You hold again, and then you let it out slow. And you start again. I would suggest that you start with 3 rounds of 5 breaths. Then work to 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30. If you get lightheaded, this is a good sign that the oxygen tension is changing in your brain. If your fingers and toes get tingly, this is a good sign that you're changing the oxygen tension. If you feel some kind of heat, temperature change in your neck, these are all great signs. You will get to the point where you can actually hold your breath for 2 or 3 minutes, sometimes 4 minutes between rounds of breath work. And then the last thing is to expose yourself to natural sunlight. There's no UVA, there's no UVB rays in this light, so that it's not the damaging rays from the sun. It still generates vitamin D3. It has a positive effect on cortisol, on vitamin D3. First light is the best way to reset your circadian rhythm. So I would suggest that you start with 3 rounds of 5 breaths. Then work to 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30. If you get lightheaded, this is a good sign that the oxygen tension is changing in your brain. If your fingers and toes get tingly, this is a good sign that you're changing the oxygen tension. If you feel some kind of heat, temperature change in your neck, these are all great signs. So every morning, contact the surface of the earth and then spend 8 minutes I do a Wim Hof style breath work. I give credit where credit's due. He's the father of breath work as far as I'm concerned. So I do 3 rounds of 30 deep breaths, like obnoxiously deep breaths. And I start by trying to take my belly button and pull my belly button out towards the wall. Imagine there's a string pulling your belly button towards the wall. 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking, followed by 30 minutes of steady state cardio exercise. So that'll strip fat off your body. My preferred way is to actually do fasted steady state cardio, but I take amino acids beforehand. Okay. So the only thing, there's a blend of perfect aminos by Dr. Minkoff that I'll take in the morning. On my weight days, I make sure that I'm fed whenever I'm lifting heavy. In your opinion? There's laws to the way that the body burns energy. Like there's physical laws to how the body burns energy, and there's no exception to these rules. Yeah. Right? The first one is if you have glucose in the bloodstream, your body will burn glucose first. Yeah. When you're out of glucose, you go to your backup reserve of energy, which is called glycogen. It's called first light. There's no UVA, there's no UVB rays in this light, so that it's not the damaging rays from the sun. It still generates vitamin D3. It has a positive effect on cortisol, on vitamin D3. First light is the best way to reset your circadian rhythm. So by contacting the surface of the earth, doing breath work, and getting first light, you can get to the same place that Dana White did with 150 grand in equipment.
I gave up dessert and sugar when I turned 40. And occasionally I'll steal a bit of dessert because it doesn't hurt if you steal it, right? But other than that, I avoid sugar, which includes simple carbohydrates, bread. I try to avoid. I've actually noticed, this is just a side note, I used to get buildup of plaque pretty easily. And every time I went to the dentist, they'd have to scrape it off. And I even bought tools to scrape it off because it was driving me nuts. I don't get plaque anymore. And I think it's because of my diet. I don't have those sugars in my mouth that the bacteria feed on and then form the biofilm on the teeth. Much better breath, by the way.
That's a benefit.
But then I got serious, and I actually, according to the Inside Tracker algorithm, got my age down from 58 to 31 in a matter of months. So that was a big drop, and I've been getting steadily younger over the last 10 years, according to that measurement, the blood tests.
He said, if ever I'm going to overeat, like a Thanksgiving meal or something, I take berberine. Those were his words. And I tried it. And what's remarkable about berberine is that you can eat enormous quantities of food and not feel as if you've eaten enormous quantities of food. Essentially, the brain can't change, or not nearly as much. And then people came along later and showed that you could open up these critical periods again, but very briefly. And it takes a very specific stimulus, essentially, high degrees of focus, etc. If I walk in the room and someone else is eating a cracker, does it break my fast? People get pretty extreme with this. My sense, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but my sense is that it depends on the context of what you did the night before, whether or not you're diabetic, lots of things.
Well, yeah, we should study the hypothalamus together, because the hypothalamus can control the aging of the body.
The most interesting part of the brain.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
If you turn on the SIRT1 gene, the SIRT2 gene that we work on in the hypothalamus, it actually will extend lifespan. So what I think is really interesting is that what we're learning from work that you and your colleagues have done, and in my lab as well, is that the body has remarkable powers of healing and recovering from illness and injury. And what we once thought was a one-way street, what I want is a credit score for the body to make it easy for people to follow their health. And there is a number. There's a biological age that you can measure. Unfortunately, the test is many hundreds of dollars right now. But in my lab, we've been able to bring that down a lot. Anti-aging is kind of the same thing, but it's got a bad rap because it's been used by a whole bunch of people that don't know what they're talking about. So I really don't like that term anti-aging. But aging as a disease and longevity are perfectly valid ways to talk about this subject. So let's talk about aging as a disease.
These old mice, we gave it to them for 3 weeks, put them back on a treadmill, and those that had the NMN in their water ran 50% further. They had better blood flow, better oxygenation, better energy. And that is literally exercise in a pill.
That's crazy.
So we're in late-stage human clinical trials now. First of all, it's not true that you need to be full or fed to think clearly. It's very clear that people who are fasting have as good, if not better, mental acuity. Okay, that's one. So I think that needs to be thrown out the window. Kids are different. We're not talking about kids, we're talking about adults. And we're not talking about malnutrition or starvation too, let's be clear. So what we're doing with our clinical trials is giving a precursor, a smaller version of this that the body will turn into NAD and bring those levels back up from where they are when you're old to where you are when you're young. And we see, at least in animals and hopefully in people, that it revs up their metabolism and makes them fight aging and disease like we do when we're young.
Oh, my workouts are very hard, so after them I feel like I need something. I don't like that feeling of like a brutal workout and then being starving for 4 or 5 hours, because then it becomes a distraction. So I listen to my body, but if I don't work out, I don't eat until dinner. Like, say a day like today, I didn't work out today.
I do not believe, nor do I support, the limiting belief that women have to accept weight gain is a normal function of aging. The National Health and Nutrition Exam Survey, which looks at data with regard to children and adults in terms of their nutrition and escalating obesity rates, compares what went on in the 1970s, where most Americans consumed 3 meals a day and no snacks. Developing cancer and Alzheimer's disease, which I like to call type 3 diabetes, if for no other reason we want to protect our brains. As wonderful as a strategy as this is, it is not for everyone. I'm going to talk briefly about the individuals that want to avoid this strategy. The choices we make in terms of nutrition are profoundly impactful on our health, more than most of us realize. During my training as a nurse practitioner many years ago, the dominant nutritional paradigm was exercise more, eat less. I found this to be profoundly ineffective for most, if not all, of my female patients. Lowers insulin levels, blood pressure, improves our cholesterol profile, and we know that it can reduce your risk for developing cancer and Alzheimer's disease, which I like to call type 3 diabetes, if for no other reason we want to protect our brain.
One of the key pillars of intermittent fasting is that for the first hour after you wake up, and potentially for longer, to not ingest any food. Okay? The second major pillar that's well supported by research is that for the 2 and ideally 3 hours prior to bedtime, you also don't ingest any food or liquid calories for that matter.
And my wife always had a suspicion that this was dietary related, and
Why?
Well, we did notice that when Michaela was young, if she ate oranges or strawberries, that she'd get a rash. Like there were, and then when she developed arthritis, if she ate oranges in particular, that would definitely cause a flare. It was the only thing we could see. The problem is that in order to identify a dietary component, the response has to be pretty quick after you eat the thing. Like if it's 2 days later, how the hell are you going to figure that out?
Right.
A lot of these responses appear to be delayed for 4 days and last a month. So good luck figuring that out.
You look different.
Yeah.
And back then you were eating like the standard diet, right? Like normal people do.
Yes.
Pasta, bread, meat,
Yes.
chicken, whatever.
Yes.
Right? You shifted over to only meat and greens. I saw you and I'm like, you look fantastic. I'm like, what are you doing? And you're like, I changed my diet. I only eat meat and greens. And I was like, wow, that's fascinating. Well, I felt like, okay, what you're doing is cutting out refined sugars and all these different things that are problematic, preservatives, all the bullshit, processed foods.
Well, all of the motivation for this has been my experience with my daughter because she has an unbelievably serious autoimmune disease. But the arthritis was the major set of symptoms. She had 40 affected joints, and she had to have her hip replaced and her ankle replaced when she was 15 and 16. And that was just a tiny fraction of the whole set of problems. But apart from that, she is doing so well now. All of her autoimmune symptoms are gone. And she was also seriously depressed, like severely depressed, way worse than you think. She died when she was 30 from an associated autoimmune condition. And my wife always had a suspicion that this was dietary related. And then when she developed arthritis, if she ate oranges in particular, that would definitely cause a flare. It was the only thing we could see.
See, now this is deep shit.
I know. I think we're probably losing half the listeners right now. You know what
Well,
the
no,
longest
the
muscle in the human body is?
Well, what is?
You know what the longest muscle in the human body is?
On mine, I do. You know the largest organ in the human body? The skin.
Yeah, very true.
Most people don't know that.
And most people
Skin
don't
is
know.
an organ.
Yes. And you can use the skin to biohack your body. In fact, one of my favorite biohacking tricks is to turn the skin into a primary route of waste elimination. And you can do 3 days of liver detoxification in 20 minutes in a dry sauna or an infrared sauna. You can do the same thing in very cold temperatures, ice bathing.